we might just get started. Warren?
Okay, so just want me to kick off?
Yep, all good. So we're Warren from CarbonXT, obviously CG1. As always, if there's any questions throughout, just type them in and I'll ask them of Warren at the end. Okay. But go for it, Warren, and good luck.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about CarbonX, code CG1. We are a pollution control company. I am the managing director, and what we particularly do is produce activated carbons. Activated carbon, for people who don't know, is a purifying substance that has been used for many, many years to, in particular, to clean water. But we saw the opening of a new market, which was mercury capture from coal-fired power stations. We developed a product that was non-brominated. Our competitors are all brominated, and that enabled us to enter the market with a competitive advantage, which was that our activated carbon would not corrode power stations. As that little intro says, we effectively are an essential service as far as the US is concerned at the moment, with all of the pandemic concerns, which means that in this terrible period, we continue to soldier on, and our power stations clients continue to operate, and indeed all of our business continues to. Emission reductions are generally around the world governed by regulation, and in the US in particular, it's the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and they've invested billions of dollars and seen the industry invest billions of dollars rather in protection control for mercury release. Over the last 18 months, we have broadened our business out into pellets, which, as that suggests, are a product made from activated carbon in pelletized form. We particularly are targeting wastewater uses and industrial uses, and therefore diversifying away from power station usage. Typically, our contracts are industrial style of partnership over a longer period of time. Utilities tend to take a long time to make decisions, but when they do, they sign you up for a reasonable period. So most of our contracts are 3 years. We do have one contract that's 6 years. And so far, touch wood, cross fingers, we have managed to repeat all of our initial contracts and haven't lost any customers. CarbonX listed on the stock exchange in ASX January 2018. We raised $10 million at a price of 70 cents, thereby at that point valuing the company at $51 million. We recently did a raising of $6 million October last year. That was at 36 cents. The in-between phase of why that share price had reduced, I think, largely could be summed up by some startup issues we had at our pellet plant, which have all been well and truly overcome now. Seems a long time in the past, but still dwells on the memory. And our share price, like just about everybody else, is well down from our recent highs. I think we're trading at around 14-15 cents, thereby giving us an enterprise value around 20 million. We do have a pretty good register, I think, for a small company. Python's just come on the register in February, I think it was, January, February, around about 8%. Capital H management is just over 5%. And then John Bevel, who used to own Darling Harbour, a wealthy property investor, 5%. He's been a very long-term shareholder, longer than I've been around the company. And Solpats is sitting just below 5%. Board is myself, MD, David Mazak, who's the head of our technology and running the operations in the US. He has a stellar background and probably the world's expert in activated carbon. And Matthew Driscoll is our chairman, who has a long-term history in small caps. As I alluded to earlier, we started off in the powdered activated carbon business. That market didn't open up at all until April 2016, so we had a little bit of revenue in that first financial year and built up with successful contracts. And then our pellet market opened for us after a fairly engaged period that we had been assessing the entry into that marketplace. We made a conscious decision to focus on pellets in FY19 and indeed this year. Basically to learn the lessons from the powdered business. As I said before, utilities take a long time to make a decision. There's a lot of testing involved. And in the pellet side, it seems to be a shorter sales cycle, and it has added advantages, including broadening us away from coal-fired power stations, and we feel that we have a very good competitive advantage in terms of our technology, and it is a very attractive opportunity for us in terms of margins. Picture of the two products that we operate. I've talked a bit about powdered activated carbon. It really does look like black talcum powder. What I haven't said though is that we produce our own. We have a manufacturing facility in Georgia, produces 10,000 tonnes a year. Our major competitors produce their activated carbon from coal. We produce it from a wood waste product. Our cost to build that facility was approximately a 20th of the cost of our competitors. And that was through our own innovation. We sold about 5,000 tonnes to 8 customers last FY19. We still have all of those customers. We have 4 significant tests and bids out at the moment, and we do very much hope to get one of those over the line in the next few months. We have, through bringing in our own manufacturing, been very focused over the last year, really coming up to 18 months, on improving our gross margins, reducing our costs. And I'm happy to say we're now well over 30% and trending overall towards 40% in our business. The pelletized activated carbon product, we predominantly produce our pellets in Arden Hills, which is in Minnesota. It's very close to the major contract that we have in Wisconsin, and hence why we built it there. We are finding significant interest at the moment with all of the production issues that everyone around the world is having, and we're finding significant issue from domestic customers and distribution companies looking for a solution that is not China-based. We believe we're the only pellet manufacturer in the US servicing this market, and I think that's why we are focusing so heavily on it, and we do hope to announce some further developments in terms of customer acquisitions in the near future. As you can see from a standing start, we pretty much got up to the same size as our powdered activated carbon last year with significant growth. What's driving our demand? I mentioned earlier the mercury capture market. It's governed by an EPA rule called Mercury and Air Toxic Standards, or MATS. Essentially requires coal-fired power stations to capture 90% of mercury emissions. Water emissions from coal-fired power stations are near, we believe, to being promulgated They will eliminate bromine and bromide as part of those standards. The significance of that is that all of our competitors, bar none, add bromine to their activated carbon to act as an attraction agent or an oxidizing agent to capture the mercury. The mercury binds to the activated carbon, has a very strong chemical bind, and then comes out as you would normally treat any ash from a power station. There is a global treaty in place. Many more countries are joining in there. At this point, 100% of our business is in the US, and we've got enough business there that we're not actively chasing Europe, which is opening up, but we have been asked a couple of times to look at some various tests, which we've done successfully. So we'll see where that goes, but at this point in time, our existing business in the US is more than enough for us to handle. Our predominant key feature of the activated carbon is that it's non-brominated. This is our powdered activated carbon. As I said, our competitors all use bromine. What's the significance of that is that essentially it corrodes the silos and air heaters and other things that it finds its way into, and that has a significant capex cost. I talked a bit about powdered activated carbon, activated carbon pellets earlier. They're effectively, as they sound, extruded carbon that is into cylindrical pellets. We are concentrating on selling into industrial and wastewater companies, basically using it for both air and liquid phase applications. And our key advantage really is our ability to tailor or engineer those pellets to the satisfaction of the end customer. I've really skipped over it, but our team is really quite amazing in terms of the scientific and technology input that we have. We have about, I think it's 4 PhDs on staff, and pretty much everybody has a master's in chemistry or engineering at the very least. And so we are able to give our customers tremendous feedback and tailor the product, as I said, for their end use. We're very competitive on price. We believe that we shouldn't be. We are producing premium products, and we intend to therefore grow our margins. But our initial strategy has been at least to meet what is out there. Albeit the tariffs that have been applied to imports, which are predominantly out of India on commodity powdered activated carbon, or China in both pellets and carbon, have certainly given us some competitive advantage. As I mentioned earlier, David Mazak is our technology head and a world leader in activated carbon. In fact, he's for over a decade actually written the standards for the water industry in the US. So he's been a tremendous leader of the development of our products. As you would expect, we can't at this unfortunate time just skip over COVID-19. But as I said earlier, as an essential service, as a key supplier to power stations and utilities more generally, we effectively have little risk of plant closures. Our staff are typically in hazard gear and face masks and safety helmets anyway, so risk of transmission in our business very low, so it's really an external matter. And obviously we are paying attention to social distancing and the like. In terms of other aspects of this, though, is we have had fairly significant inbound inquiries about supplying pellets and powder in future, given the impacts on trade lines and I think, to be fair, a little bit of pushback against Chinese supplies. This can be summarised really as US going down that Buy America route, or route, as they would say. Also, just a risk mitigation rather than just Buy America. Concern about supply chains has become prominent, and indeed our competitors who seemingly import pellets from China have even started discussing with us whether we can supply pellets to them. And obviously that would be a selective decision based on what's in it for both of us. But if they're targeting a market, if they are supplying a market that we're not really after, then I don't see any risk whatsoever in selling to those guys. The opportunity in pellets is widespread. When we first got into this, we thought the market would be about 40,000 tonnes at a price of around about $2,500 a tonne. I think we feel that the market is much bigger than that now, and continues to broaden as we get into more development. We're seeing applications in the LNG industry, heavy manufacturing, wastewater treatment and filtration market more generally, which really means selling to industrials. And one of our key clients, Purafil, that we announced in September last year, they are definitely targeting manufacturing and industrials. One thing we mentioned in our last 4C was, and a quarterly update, was that we were very proud to have just sold into a product into a phosphate or nutrient pollution market. This is something that we will be growing significantly, we hope, over the next year. And Florida kindly announced a bill last week called SB12, which basically looks to capture nutrient runoff into the waterways. So basically the blue-green algae problem that has been seen right around the world, that particular issue can be solved with our product, which effectively is another form of pellet. And we have successfully removed phosphate completely from liquid streams. We're fundamentally competing against biological solutions, which have a much higher capex. So in very competitive, very congested locations like downtown CBD type situations, we're much better, a lot less side effects. But also at the smaller end, our product is a compact vessel design, which is very scalable. So I would like to emphasise, though, we're just in commercialisation of this. We're not seeking to sell to 50 people. We are locked in with two potential clients at the moment, and we're working with them to effectively use them as a test base. Having said that, we already sold the product for a few $100,000 into one wastewater utility, and it worked really well. We do believe that this is a very exciting market for us because the addressable market is bigger than the pellet market itself. Well, it's not just bigger, it's considerably bigger. Our production facilities, I mentioned earlier, Arden Hills is in Minnesota. Black Birch is where our powdered activated carbon facility is in Georgia, and our head office in Gainesville, Florida, which is the home of the University of Florida. Why Gainesville? Well, because of that UF connection. It's basically ranked number 3 in environmental engineering. Numbers 1 and 2 are very much Ivy League type colleges, and so we're able to pick the eyes out of the graduates, and more particularly the PhD and master's level research people, and get the highest caliber people we can at a relatively cheap price compared to other jurisdictions and areas. We can grow, we can expand both of their plants relatively cheaply. We have estimated about $3 million each to double the capacity of black birch and Arden Hills. We are currently working on a intermediate phase, as I call it, expansion at a bit less than that sort of money, to look at a smaller expansion at Arden Hills if and when we win these additional deals. As I mentioned earlier, board is myself. I have for my sins, originally electrical engineer, spent most of my life in and around the power sector, developing, owning and running pretty much any part of the industry, from generation through retail through distribution. Founded Infogen, and as I said, quite a significant background in commercialisation in the utility space. Matthew Driscoll is our chairman. He took over from Bruce Hancock's, who was ex-Walker's rep, and prior to that, Matthew Quinn. Matthew Driscoll has quite a long-term background in capital markets and small cap area, and has been providing a lot of guidance to us. David, as I mentioned earlier, chairman of the Activated Carbon Standards, significant work in Waterworks Association, and has had a key hand in drafting the mercury rules around the world, and is the key driver really of our IP portfolio. Well, that's my presentation. I'm happy to take questions. It really was pitched as an overview and an introduction to us, and happy to take any questions that anyone has.
Warren, we've got one question from Josh. Can you provide an update on soon-to-be signed deals mentioned in prior announcements that seem to be dragging on, and the reason why that is the case?
Yeah, so we are in active discussions on a number of opportunities, quite advanced, markup of contracts. Why have they been slower? Well, now it's obvious because of COVID-19. It's very hard to actually have conference calls, and it's all conference calls rather than meetings. So it's trying to coordinate a bunch of people into the one space at one time. Prior to that, I think just the conservatism of the clients that we've been dealing with, getting all the ducks in a row. But we are confident that they will go ahead, and we are in many cases now in the final part of actually of documenting and getting those deals done.
And another question that we had emailed through: what's the scope for international geographic spread, and as a result, how might FX impact your AUD earnings?
Yeah, so all of our business is in the US. We are expanding into Canada at the moment. As I mentioned earlier, on the powdered activated carbon side, we have had some interest from Europe. I don't think, obviously we can't ship that material back to Europe. That wouldn't be a very smart thing to do, but I think that we could basically license our technology to a European company and work their way through that. And I guess the other significant opportunity for us, our original pellet opportunity, original pellet contract was to service the first use of high efficiency, low emission coal-fired technology in the US, and in particular it's Japanese technology. And Japan have recently announced that they're going ahead with 20 coal-fired power stations, so new ones. So they will all use that technology, and so we would like to think that we have an opportunity to sell pellets through that mechanism to the Japanese market. Certainly, they need a new supplier for those pellets. There's only one at the moment. and I think we would be well positioned to do that. But as we know, the Japanese move pretty slowly, but it's a big market, and I'm sure with the right with the right willingness there, we could make a real go of that.
No worries. It's been seriously comprehensive. Thanks so much, Warren. If there's any more questions, you can see Warren's details on there, or again, you can shoot me an email or give me a call anytime. Warren, thanks very much for making the time.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Absolute
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers. Bye-bye.